The call of the clock. Imagine a small town blanketed in snow, where every house glows with the vibrant colors of Christmas. Children's laughter echoes through the streets, and the scent of freshly baked cookies lingers in the crisp winter air. It seems like the perfect holiday setting, doesn't it? But tucked away on a quiet street lies a mysterious shop. A clock shop with a secret that no one has been able to unravel for decades. What if I told you that inside this shop, there is a special clock? A clock that stops ticking every Christmas Eve at exactly 11:45 p.m. A clock that doesn't measure just time, but the heart. What is it waiting for to start ticking again? What message is it trying to convey? Today you're about to uncover a magical story filled with mystery, emotion, and the true essence of the Christmas spirit. You're about to embark on an unforgettable journey with Ellie, a young woman who inherited this shop and is about to face the greatest challenge of her life. But beware, this story isn't just about a clock. It's about the miracles that happen when we least expect them, and how Christmas can transform everything around us. Stay with me until the end because what you're about to hear might just change the way you see Christmas, and time itself. The clock's call. Snow fell gently over the streets of Holly Springs, a quaint town renowned for its festive Christmas celebrations. Lights on the houses twinkled in shades of red, green, and gold, while children darted excitedly along the sidewalks, marveling at shop windows adorned with Christmas trees and sleds overflowing with gifts. Ellie parked the car in front of a small old shop. Pendulum and Sons Clocks, read the sign above the door with gold letters worn by time. The shop had belonged to a distant relative, Great-Uncle Simon, whom Ellie had only heard about in family stories. After his sudden death, the property had been passed down to her, the sole heir. Upon entering, Ellie was greeted by the smell of polished wood and clock oil. The place was a mixture of workshop and museum, with clocks of all sizes and styles covering the walls and floor. Some ticked softly while others stood still, immersed in nostalgic silence. In the center of the shop was the largest of all, a grandfather clock that almost reached the ceiling, with a face adorned in gold and details resembling snowflakes. There was something both fascinating and unsettling about it. Ellie approached, noticing that the face read 11:45 p.m., but the pendulum was motionless. "It's always like that," said a voice behind her, making her jump in surprise. It was Mr. Graham, the old clockmaker who had worked for Simon. He was short, with messy white hair and glasses that seemed to magnify his eyes. "That clock stops every year at the same time, and no matter what we do, it only starts again if something special happens." "Something special?" Ellie asked, confused. Graham nodded, walking toward the clock. "That's what Simon always said. He called it the miracle clock. Every Christmas he waited for the clock to start moving on its own. I never quite understood it, but he seemed to believe the clock was waiting for something. Something only Christmas could bring." The first night in the shop. Later that night, Ellie stayed in the shop, trying to understand the strange story behind the clock. With the snow falling outside and the city lights glowing in the distance, she felt a calm she hadn't experienced in a long time. Since losing her mother the previous year, Christmas had lost its sparkle. Holly Springs, with its clock shop and traditions, seemed like the perfect place to start anew. She opened an old drawer in the main counter and found a notebook. Simon's name was written on the cover, and the pages were filled with detailed sketches of the large clock, along with intriguing notes. 11:45 p.m., the moment when time stops. Only the spirit of Christmas can make it move again. Ellie frowned, running her fingers over the words. There were more notes about miracles, moments of connection, and acts of true generosity. One of the pages contained the phrase, "The clock does not measure time but the heart." "What kind of mystery did you leave me, Simon?" Ellie murmured, looking again at the clock. The subtle whispers. As the night went on, Ellie began to hear faint sounds in the shop. It was as if the clocks were whispering, ticking in rhythms that didn't match. The large clock, however, remained still, its imposing presence casting a long shadow on the floor. The clock's story. The next morning, Mr. Graham returned to the shop and found Ellie sitting at the counter, surrounded by notes. "Did you spend the entire night here?" he asked. "I couldn't stop thinking about the clock," Ellie replied. "What do you know about it? Why did Simon call it the miracle clock?" Graham settled into a nearby chair, adjusting his glasses. "That clock has been here for as long as I can remember. It was built by a clockmaker a long time ago, a man named Ezra Pendulum. He used to say the clock wasn't just a machine to count time, but a reminder that Christmas was the season for true miracles. Ezra believed that if people forgot the spirit of Christmas, the clock would stop. But what needs to happen for it to work again?" Ellie asked, intrigued. Graham shrugged. No one knows for sure. But Simon believed the clock would only start again if something special happened. Something that reflected the true meaning of Christmas. A call to action. As Graham spoke, Ellie looked outside and saw children playing in the snow. Yet something about the festive scene felt off. An elderly woman was walking alone down the street, carrying a bag that seemed far too heavy for her. Ellie felt a tug at her heart, a feeling she couldn't ignore. She left Graham in the shop and ran to the door. "Wait," she called, catching up with the woman. "Can I help you with that?" The woman looked at Ellie with surprise and after a moment, smiled. "Thank you, dear. My name is Agnes. This Christmas has been hard, but your help makes it so much better." Ellie smiled as she helped Agnes carry the bag to her home. Along the way they talked about the town, about Christmas, and how small gestures can make a big difference. When Ellie returned to the shop she felt something shift. The large clock seemed less foreboding, almost as if it was waiting for more. Small miracles. That afternoon, after helping Agnes, Ellie returned to the shop with renewed energy. There was something special about the way the elderly woman's face had lit up from a simple act of kindness. As she looked at the large clock in the center of the shop, she felt that moment had been more meaningful than it seemed. Mr. Graham, still seated near the counter, noticed the change in Ellie. "You helped someone, didn't you?" he asked with a knowing smile. "Yes," Ellie replied, surprised by the question. "But how did you know?" "Because that's how it begins," Graham said, gesturing toward the large clock. "The spirit of Christmas isn't in grand gestures, but in the small miracles we create for others. And the clock, it feels that." Ellie looked at the golden clock face. For a moment she thought she saw the hour hand move slightly, but the clock remained stuck at 11:45 p.m. She sighed, feeling a mixture of curiosity and frustration. If that's the case, what else do I need to do? The journey through the town. Determined to discover more, Ellie decided to explore the town and get to know its people. Walking through the decorated streets, she noticed small signs of lives that needed something more during this time of year. A child, sitting alone on a bench, watched others playing in the snow. An elderly man, sitting outside a cafe, seemed lost in thought. A young mother struggled to carry shopping bags while trying to manage two small children running around her. Each person Ellie saw seemed to carry a piece of a larger puzzle. She knew that somehow she needed to get involved. Inspired by what she had learned from Agnes, she decided to take action. Ellie's first gestures. Ellie started with something simple. She approached the child sitting alone on the bench and struck up a conversation. "Don't you want to play with them?" she asked, pointing to the children in the snow. The boy shook his head. "They don't like me," he said, looking down. Ellie sat beside him, picked up a small snowball from the ground and handed it to him. "What if you started the game?" she suggested. Reluctantly at first, the boy took the snowball and threw it toward the group. One of the children turned around, laughing, and soon invited him to play. Ellie smiled as she watched him run off to join the others. Next, she stepped into the cafe and approached the elderly man. He looked surprised when Ellie asked if she could sit with him. "Nobody usually keeps an old stranger like me company," he said, half joking, half sad. "Well, today's your lucky day," Ellie replied with a warm smile. They talked for a while, and the man ended up sharing stories of his youth, when he sang in Christmas choirs and helped decorate the local church. Ellie felt that even for just a few minutes, he had remembered happy times. The clock reacts. When Ellie returned to the shop that evening, something felt different. The large clock was still frozen, but the atmosphere seemed more alive. Graham noticed it immediately. "Did you feel that?" he asked excitedly. Ellie nodded. "It's like something is changing." She looked at the clock again and saw that the pendulum was moving slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if it were trying to swing. The minute hand seemed to have advanced a little, but it still hadn't passed 11:46 p.m. "It's working," Graham said with a smile. "You're making it work, Ellie?" The voice of the town. That night, as Ellie was alone in the shop, she began to hear soft sounds coming from outside. They weren't footsteps or laughter but something more subtle. It sounded like music, distant yet familiar. She opened the door and saw a small crowd gathered in the town square. It was the local choir, singing Christmas carols under the starlight. People were united, singing together, and Ellie felt warmth in her chest. For a moment, she looked at the clock tower in the square and saw that it read exactly 11:45 p.m. That was when she realized something important. The great clock in her shop wasn't just connected to her, it was connected to the entire town. If the clock needed a miracle, perhaps it required a collective miracle. Something that involved everyone in Holly Springs. A new purpose. Back at the shop, Ellie began planning something special. If the clock needs a Christmas miracle, I'm going to make it happen, she said to herself. She started writing notes and invitations, preparing a surprise for the entire town. She knew it would be difficult to bring so many people together, but she was determined. With Mr. Graham's help, she spread the message throughout Holly Springs: gather in the square tomorrow night. Something special is going to happen. Preparing for the miracle. The next morning, Ellie woke up early with renewed energy. The invitation she had spread through the town had sparked people's curiosity. As she walked through the streets, she overheard snippets of conversations. What could she be planning, or are you going to the square tonight? Mr. Graham arrived at the shop with a satisfied smile. Ellie, you've managed to stir up something we haven't seen in years. It seems like the entire town is talking about this. Ellie smiled but felt the weight of responsibility. I still don't know if this will be enough to make the clock work. What if nothing happens? Graham placed a hand on her shoulder. The magic of Christmas isn't in immediate results, but in what you do to create something special. Trust the process. The community's help. As the day went on, Ellie realized her effort wasn't solitary. Many people began to offer their help. Agnes, the elderly woman she had helped on her first day, brought a large pot of hot chocolate to warm everyone in the square. The local choir decided to put on a special performance, rehearsing classic Christmas carols. Even the local baker, who rarely participated in events, promised to bring trays of cookies. Ellie felt her heart swell as she watched the community come together. She didn't know exactly what would happen that night, but she had a feeling she was on the right path. Graham's revelation. Shortly before sunset, Graham called Ellie over to the large clock in the shop. He looked thoughtful, staring at the still clock face. There's something I haven't told you before, he began hesitantly. Simon believed the clock wasn't just waiting for a miracle. He used to say the clock was a mirror, a reflection of what's in people's hearts. Ellie frowned. A mirror? What does that mean? It means it doesn't work on its own, Graham explained. If you and the people in town believe, if you allow yourselves to feel the true spirit of Christmas, it might start working again. But that takes faith. It's not something you can force. Ellie nodded, understanding what Graham was trying to say. It wasn't just about organizing an event or creating a tradition. It was about connecting people, helping them see what really matters. Christmas Eve. As night fell, the town square began to fill with people. Lights twinkled on the decorated trees, and the sound of joyful voices echoed in the cold air. The choir began to sing, and Ellie felt moved to see so many people gathered together. In the center of the square, a makeshift stage had been set up. Ellie stepped onto it and picked up a microphone, taking a deep breath before speaking. Thank you all for coming. When I arrived in Holly Springs, I didn't know what to expect. But I've learned something important. Christmas is about being together, about sharing moments that warm our hearts. Tonight, let's all remember that. The crowd applauded, and Ellie felt a wave of gratitude. As she looked around at the people, she noticed something in the sky. A single star shone brighter than the others, casting a soft light over the square. The miracle of the clock. Back at the shop, the large clock began to vibrate gently. Graham, who had stayed behind, widened his eyes as he saw the pendulum begin to swing. The sound of ticking echoed through the shop, and the hands of the clock began to move slowly. The clock, which had been still for so long, now ticked forward with purpose. When Ellie returned to the shop with Graham, the two stood silently watching the clock face. The minute hand moved to 11:50, then 11:55, and finally midnight. The moment of midnight. As the clock struck midnight, it played a soft melody, a tune that seemed to fill the shop with light and warmth. Ellie and Graham looked at each other, deeply moved. You did it, Graham said, smiling with tears in his eyes. You brought the spirit of Christmas back. A new tradition. The next morning, news of the clock's miracle spread throughout the town. Ellie decided to keep the shop open and turn it into a central hub for Christmas celebrations. Each year, the clock would serve as a reminder that the spirit of Christmas lived in small acts of kindness and the unity between people. Ellie finally felt she had found her place, not just in Holly Springs, but also in the heart of Christmas. Reflection and closure. Christmas morning dawned peacefully over Holly Springs. Snow fell gently, covering the square and streets in a sparkling blanket that reflected the sunlight. Ellie opened the clock shop, greeted by a sense of peace and fulfillment. The soft melody the grand clock had played the night before still echoed in her memory, a reminder of the miracle she had witnessed. She approached the clock, now keeping perfect time. The pendulum swung steadily, filling the room with its rhythmic, soothing sound. Ellie placed her hand on the polished wood and smiled. "Thank you, Simon," she whispered. "I finally understand what you meant. A surprise visit." As Ellie prepared for the day, a knock at the door caught her attention. When she opened it, she found Agnes, the elderly woman she had helped days earlier, holding a small package wrapped in red paper. "Good morning, dear," Agnes said warmly. "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for me and for this town. You've brought something special back to Holly Springs." Ellie accepted the package with surprise. "Thank you, but I didn't do this alone. The whole town made it happen." "You were the heart of it," Agnes replied with a wise smile. "And I think Simon knew you were the right person to carry on his mission." Inside the package, Ellie found an old pocket watch with a delicate inscription. "Time reflects the heart." She held the watch, feeling the weight of its message. Simon had left this gift for her, knowing she would be the one to restore the spirit of Holly Springs. A new tradition. Throughout the day, people began arriving at the shop, sharing stories of what they had felt the night before. Families who hadn't spoken in years reconciled, neighbors connected, and many shared moments that brought back the magic of Christmas. Ellie realized the clock shop wasn't just a place to fix machines, it was a gathering spot, a symbol of what Christmas represented. She decided that every year on Christmas Eve she would open the shop to the community, bringing everyone together to celebrate the season's spirit. The clock in the town. Later, as night fell, Ellie walked to the square and looked at the glowing lights around her. The town clock tower ticked perfectly, and she felt everything was in harmony. The grand clock in the shop was now a symbol of something greater, not just miracles but the power of kindness, love and unity. Sitting on a bench in the square, Ellie felt a familiar presence. She wasn't alone. In that moment she knew Simon would always be with her, just like the Christmas spirit he had believed in so deeply. A message for the future. On the morning of December 26th, Ellie wrote a note in Simon's journal. "The clock doesn't just measure time. It measures the impact we have on each other. When we share kindness and love, we make time move in ways we don't understand. This Christmas taught me that it's not the grand gestures that change the world, but the little miracles we share every day." She closed the notebook, placed it next to the large clock and turned on the store lights. She knew this was just the beginning of something bigger, not just for her but for everyone who passed through Holly Springs. Transform your Christmas into an unforgettable experience. How about celebrating the most magical Christmas ever, creating moments that your family will cherish forever? We have exactly what you need to make your holiday extraordinary. Perfect Christmas Dinner ebook. Discover amazing and practical recipes, along with tips for setting up an elegant table. Impress your family with a dinner full of flavor and style. 400 Christmas Cookie Recipes ebook. Bring sweetness and fun to your holiday. Bake delightful cookies that will make your table beautiful and your loved ones happy. Christmas Soundtrack Collection. Add the perfect finishing touch with 21 exclusive tracks to set the mood for a magical and emotional celebration. Click the link pinned in the comments and get these incredible tools to make your Christmas truly special. And if you want more emotional stories and holiday tips, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our upcoming videos.